health. It could be. Um, I honestly think that's the only reason for it because I don't see somebody who's clearly focused having the need to commit suicide.
Hmm.
But it could also be brought out of the environment. Maybe they don't have a mental um, gene that is causing them to act that way, but maybe their environment comes in and causes them to think that their only option is to opt out of life. Is that something that they have to work through on the other side, or is that something that they can be reincarnated and come back and try again?
So it's my understanding that people who die by suicide are not trying to end their life as much as they're trying to end their pain, and they perceive that that's the way to do it. The difficulty with that concept, which the New Age and religion teaches, that you go to a better place after death. The difficulty with that is that you don't. So when you die by suicide, your physical body is dead, but you still have all of your emotions, you have your mental beliefs, you have all of these other parts of you that still exist. Your consciousness still exists. So, but the other piece of that is that when you take away the physical body piece of it,
Mhm.
everything else is going to magnify. So your emotions magnify, your beliefs magnify, the difficulty with your consciousness, the survival, whatever was going on, it all magnifies. The pain magnifies. And they many times become caught up in that reality and they walk in circles, so to speak.
Okay. What about the memories from this life? Do we carry the memories over?
You carry the memories over, but obviously most people don't remember. But there are um, situations where you can have dreams, where
Mhm.
you can have these flashes of where'd that come from? Why would I even think of that? You can get these different flashes that bring back or that reflect memories from another incarnation.
So dreams are something that you can kind of tap into. Some people can. I know some people don't dream. They have no dreams of anything. But they have majority of people will typically remember their dreams.
Hmm.
They might sound a little crazy, right? The ones that are crazy are more of the conscious mind trying to figure out different things, correct? And then the ones that seem and feel more like, hey, I was this other person, I was in a different body, I had a house that I recognized, but it wasn't this house. It wasn't this life. I had friends that I knew them, but I didn't know them. Have you
Hmm.
ever heard of stories like that where people recount certain things?
So, in my experience, there are dreams,
Hmm.
and then there are out of body experiences where you're
Okay.
actually traveling not on purpose. You're not trying to travel.
Mhm.
It's more of something that occurs that was a choice by your soul, and you're experiencing something in a different reality, but it's not a dream. It's an experience. That's what I call it, an experience.
Okay.
So you have dreams where your brain is putting together multiple pictures to form a story.
Okay.
So it's your brain has more pictures than you can count, and it's pulling at those pictures to create a story for a purpose, whether you need to analyze it or whether you're simply relieving stress.
Hmm.
So I've been taught there are brain dreams. Dreams simply come from the brain, and there's not a whole lot to do with those. And then you have subconscious dreams, you have higher mind dreams. Those are usually the messages that you need to be listening to. And it's always going to be symbolic. A dream is always symbolic, whereas an experience is literal.
Okay. So the symbolic dream is more of like the bottled water. We're pouring it into a cup. Why did I do that in a dream? That's the symbolic message, correct? It's not recounting a past life or anything like that. It's just saying you need to either fill something up or you need to empty something, or that's what you're talking about as far as symbolic, correct?
Correct. And I'm not, an expert in dream interpretation by any means. I try to interpret my own, but
Hmm.
for example, water usually represents emotion. So let's say you're
Interesting.
having a dream where you're struggling in water,
Hmm.
a pool, a large, the ocean, a sea, whatever, a lake, but you're struggling.
Right.
That might mean that you're struggling with your emotions.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting to know because not that I had a dream about water. I just happened to sit here, but something to that effect. If you were to have more of a story-like dream, to where you have a purpose, you're doing something, an action that you typically wouldn't do. Could that be perceived as symbolic? Maybe it's in a past tense version. So you say like, oh, I had a dream I was in the 1920s and I was wearing some big jacket and coat, and there was this girl that I was dancing with, and right, we have like a dream like that. Are we symbolically trying to tell ourselves something, or could that be that we are reliving a memory that's kind of buried deep?
It could be either.
Yeah. How do we know to tell them apart? Is it the emotion, the feeling?
I always tell people to pay more attention to the emotion and feeling and theme of
Mm-hmm.
a dream rather than so many details.
Okay.
You can look at some details, of course, but you're more looking at the overall theme
Okay.
of the dream.
So theme is in what was the outcome of the dream or the point to the dream?
Kind of what was going on overall throughout
Okay.
the dream.
Okay.
So, take your example that you just gave. Let's say that person, the dreamer,
Mm-hmm.
is looking for something and they keep going through these different rooms and they're wearing certain clothing, but they're always looking for something. So that would be the theme.
I see. Okay, that makes more sense then. Now, what about the communication that people have outside of dreams, but happen when they're sleeping or in that mode of sleep? There's times when I'll lay down and I'll hear my name called, or I'll hear somebody walk into my room. It startles me and I wake up, but
Mm-hmm.
there's nobody there. So, is that something that people are they experiencing now, a spirit coming through? Are they experiencing like an entity coming through that's talking to them? There's a lot of times it's not just my name that I hear. I could hear somebody actually talking,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a muffled voice of some kind. And I can't make it out. I don't know what it is. Is that my brain playing tricks on me, or is that something that I'm connecting into something?
I doubt it would be your brain
Mm-hmm.
playing tricks on you. I would say that a situation like that, someone in the non-physical is walking into the room trying to communicate.
Okay.
I've always been told that the Earth is the most haunted planet. Out of all
Hmm.
the planets, it's the most haunted because people have a hard time moving on. So just because someone passes away doesn't mean they cross over.
Okay. So speaking of somebody pass away, if they pass away and they don't come back through, like they don't come through dreams, because I know a lot of people probably experience, everybody's experienced the passing. That's just something that we're all going to experience in our
Mm-hmm.
life. When they experience a passing and they know, or they've been told, or they've heard that people should dream of that loved one, if they don't, does that mean that they're not coming through, that they've moved on, they're doing something different? Or does that just mean that there's not a connection that they can't achieve at that time?
It could be any of those.
Okay.
It can be that the person has crossed over, they've moved on with their guides or other loved ones, and now they're going through a review process. They're reviewing their life, their choices, what they still need to learn and work on, and then they're moving forward from there.
Do we have a choice to come back?
It's always a choice.
Okay.
There's never an entity or a group of entities that determine what your choices need to be.
Okay. So it's really up to us.
Always.
Always. Okay.
Always.
So when it's up to us, if we decide that we want to stay on the other side, then we can stay on
Mm-hmm.
the other side.
Yeah.
But what if a loved one decides to have a life and we want to go help that loved one? Then a lot of times we could probably enter into a life just to be there to
You
help.
can.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people who could be just walking around, they don't need to be here. They don't need to really learn anything, but they're experiencing this life to help somebody else.
I would say 99% of the population has something to work on and learn and heal
Okay.
to varying degrees. You can have a person who really has healed a lot. They have a very high level of consciousness. They have a very high level of wisdom.
Okay.
They know exactly their pathway. They have moved beyond the limitations of judgment and anger. They have deep compassion for others. They carry this deep, profound wisdom
Mm-hmm.
and compassion. they don't have any really deep issues to work with. Those are what I've been told are teachers. They are here to assist humanity, which obviously is not, we're not getting much better. Our world's not getting much better.
Right.
And they're here to assist humanity, but they are very few of those in comparison to the 7.5 billion people.
On average, would you say that the majority of people are good?
Define good.
Well, I'm trying to think in terms of a religious standpoint. As we're talking, I'm thinking we start bringing up things like reincarnation, you have a choice, etc., etc. But in the mainstream religions, Catholic, Christian, uh,
Jewish.
Jewish, well, I don't think Jewish really have a heaven. I'm not Jewish, so I don't know what the outcome is after death, if it's like purgatory or what. I mean, everybody seems to define you have a left and a right scenario. You either go this way or you go that way. And it's not up to you. It's up to somebody else to judge you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that, why do we have that? Why is that so ingrained in us? And why are we so fearful of the bad and the good at the same time? Because we're fearful of it. We don't want to be judged, even though it's by the creator, essentially, who created us and then who should know everything about us, right? Because intimately, a lot of those religions say that God knows you, God's with you. But at the same time, when you die, God's going to be a judge to you. And if you were bad, you go to the bad place. If you're good, you go to the good place. And it's for eternity. You have no other option. There's no try again button, right? But to me, a lot of that doesn't quite make sense because for me, I feel like, well, I'm a pretty fair person and I care about people deeply. So if I was a god, I would not want to choose, I would not want them to go to a bad place. People who are bad, though, where do they go? Like, really bad. Like, you can sense that they have something just completely wrong with them.
So when you say bad, do you mean that they have harmed other people?
Harmed, yes, definitely. There's also a different kind of bad, too. There's a mental bad. There's people out there who mentally are narcissistic, bipolar. Their brain's not working right, but they cause so much negativity and stress and problems, and it's more of a mental abuse to people that it takes the life out of some people who are very close in family to them. You can't get out of it, especially relationships. It's very hard for people to get out of that type of abuse because it's very low key. It's not something that's publicized out into the world. It's, hey, behind the scenes, we're dealing with a lot of stress on our marriage, on our family, on whatever. When somebody says that, and when somebody has that kind of life, what they're going through, that person is putting them through that. Is this all a lesson for us, or is this something that these people truly will, who are causing that effect, will be not punished for, but they'll have to answer to in the next life?
No, they have to answer to themselves. So
Okay.
before a person can harm another person, intentionally, I mean,
Yeah.
they're harming themselves already. They're already so caught up in that energy of self-abuse before they've even harmed someone else. Now, individuals who choose to harm others on purpose with the intent, when they pass, they're probably going to continue their own self-abuse. They're probably going to create their own version of hell in terms of consciousness.
So essentially, what you're saying is their soul is not comfortable with being abusive like that in this life. So the soul is going to provide the guilt in the next life, essentially on the other side of this, right?
No. So the higher soul is always wanting to offer love and guidance.
Okay.
But the lower bodies, the lower soul is going to many times remain caught up in that energy of abuse and harm, and until that person makes different choices and truly wants to heal, which can happen. Now, what also does happen is that someone who abuses someone in this life, well, the one who was abused many times was the abuser in another life.
Okay.
And they switched roles.
More like a karma.
Karma, I've been taught karma is the absence of unconditional love. But yes,
Really?
kind of a karmic energy where they come back. And in some cases, people switch those roles back and forth repeatedly over several lifetimes. The abuser becomes the abused, and so on and so
Vice
forth.
versa. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So if somebody, though, if you said that Earth is really haunted,
Mm-hmm.
so we have a lot of souls kind of wandering around here, right?
From what I've seen.
That aren't incarnating.
Right.
Are these good souls? Are they bad souls? Are they both?
Well, if they are just wandering around, I would say that they are ones who are stuck. They're in a place of pain.
Okay.
Now, some want to stay. They don't want to move on for whatever reason. There are some who want to continue creating harm. One reason why I don't think the death penalty is a good option, because when that person is killed in that manner, well, that soul isn't going to necessarily cross over. They can stick around and continue creating harm.
Okay. So in other words, when we die, we can choose if we want to stay.
Mm-hmm.
So if they want to stay here, they can stay here and they can still cause a negative effect.
Yes.
Or positive.
Right.
Okay. And it's up to them.
Mm-hmm.
So why isn't there, if we have laws to us as humans, why isn't there laws, natural laws, on the other side?
Well, there are universal laws. There are universal laws, but I can't say that I can dictate them. But it's all about energy. Everything is energy. That's what I've been taught. Everything's energy, and all energy carries consciousness. So there's not a law in stating that, well, you did something bad, so now you have to go to hell.
Okay.
Because, where is hell?
Right.
Isn't it a place of consciousness? How many people are alive right now in the physical, and they are in a living hell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is. They're already in hell.
I think a lot of people have thought that. They've thought, this is probably hell. This is where we're at.
And then there are people who can create a beautiful, abundant life that's full of love, full of friendship, full of adventure.
It's just a matter of them overcoming that negativity, correct?
It's making a choice that you want to understand and live your path. It's making a choice that you want to understand who you are, what's your individuality, what's your creative expression, and how do you want to express that without fear of judgment.
Okay. Now, we talked a little bit off the air about your book, and we talked a little bit about that there are some souls still wandering here who they're not healed. It's not that they're bad, but they're going through some traumatic experiences, correct?
So in Silent Whispers, this is a lot of stories about deceased children, for the most part, teenagers and children, who I encountered on some trips that are definitely not bad. But what occurred with them is that they were tortured, and they were experimented upon. Children came to me all the way from World War II, where they were experimented upon during Nazi Germany.
Okay.
And then there are children who have come to me who've been experimented upon by American scientists, more recent time, and then everything in between. Some have been kidnapped, but they've been medically experimented upon by scientists, and then tortured, and then died. And because of that pain, they were stuck. And so I was assisting them to cross over.
Where are these experiments taking place?
So the first place, well, they're all over. First of all, it's all over the world, in various locations all over the world. But one of the first place we went to, two women and I went to, was Montauk, Camp Hero in New York.
Okay, I've heard of Montauk. So I've heard of the Montauk Project from years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that what was said was there was time travel involved. There was experiments that go back to the Philadelphia experiment, which was World War II. And they were trying to figure out ways to bend space and time. And what they were doing was using kids, like you said, but they were kidnapping them. They were homeless kids, and they were kidnapping them from the streets.
Mm-hmm.
And they were taking these kids out. Nobody would miss them. Technically, they were probably like the riffraff kids. They were ones who didn't want a home, or the home wouldn't even accept them.
Right.
So nobody was going to miss them. Might as well just experiment on them. It's like free.
Right.
Yeah, free test subjects, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So with that experiment, what have you felt or heard or seen when you went to Montauk? Were these kids, were there a lot of them? Did you help them cross over? Are they still trapped?
I would think that there are still more there. It's all very. First of all, when I first went, it was all very new to me. This type of work, going to a location to help people cross over, that type of work was very new to me. I didn't know what to expect. So I had to, first of all, use my intuition. Where do you look? Where do you go? They're not just all, you don't have 500 ghosts walking around. You have to find them.
Were you drawn to Camp Hero? Was there an energy there?
It was suggested to me that I visit there, and then so we went based on a suggestion.
Okay.
But once we were there, where do you look? I mean, Camp Hero is a decent size area, and you can't get past the gate that surrounds the radar tower.
Yeah.
So all I could do was look through the chain link fence and see images that were presented to me in that area.
How recently did you go up there?
I think it was in the month of January. I think it was 2015.
Okay. I've seen, and this was going back to the 90s, when they first came out with the book, The Montauk Project, they had pictures. They were able to get into Camp Hero because Camp Hero was essentially deemed a derelict base from, I think, 83 or 84 on out. And when they got there to the base, everything was closed down. There was nobody there. There wasn't as much security or gates to that effect, so they were able to walk around and take pictures. When they did, they realized that there were cables, electrical cables, and phone cables going down into the ground on the base to an underground facility. And when they looked at the cables, the markings, they had I think it was like 1992 or 93, because it was just when they created the book. And it had that date stamped on there, meaning it was brand new. It was all recent. It looked new at that time. Do you feel there's something still going on there? Or do you think it's completely empty?
I don't think that it's empty.
Okay.
Some of the first kids that I saw were crazy. They were, like I would say there was like 20, 30 screaming, holding their heads. They were naked, non-physical, of course, but they were, I couldn't comprehend what they were saying or what they wanted. I was so taken aback. I didn't know how to process it or what to do with it. And so we kept searching. And when I went back to them, there was interference there. And there's continued to be interference on all of the trips that we've gone on. There have been certain adults who interfere with us being able to help some of the kids, or interfere with the kids receiving some of our help. They're not always completely successful, but there has been some interference.
So when you say interference, do you mean like electrical interference? Do you mean like there's like a force that somebody else has that's combating what you are picking up?
I believe it was our second trip when we went to Los Alamos, and the laboratory that's there.
Yes.
So we went to Los Alamos, and we definitely were able to assist some kids, found some kids there in some of the woods. It's always kind of near a wooded area that we find kids. It was there that we first encountered a non-physical male. And I said to the two women I was with, I said, there's a non-physical man over there, and he looks angry. And he looks like he doesn't want us assisting these kids. And we were talking to a teenage girl at that point, trying to help her cross over. What I later learned is that it was a non-physical male, except he wasn't dead. He was doing a mental body projection. So remote viewing. It was years after that I looked up remote viewing on the CIA's website, and they do talk about it, and they talk about how they used to train people to do it.
Right.
Well, I think they still do train people to do it. Yeah. Well, why would they stop if it worked? So those men, those mental body projections, or the remote viewers, have followed us on our trips time and again.
So when somebody remote views, they can tap into that spiritual side of things too. So they're also on the plane of where these spirits are at the same time?
I don't know how they do it, because I've never done it. But my understanding, my interpretation of it, is that they know how to project their mental body. So we have, our physical body, obviously. We have our emotional body, our mental body, our spirit body. We have our soul body. We have actually 12 altogether. But the lower 7, one of those is the mental body, astral, etherical, so forth.
Okay.
They project their mental body so that they can view. They can view what's going on, so they can see me talking to, in that case, a teenage girl who was trying to receive our help. And then they try to interfere. So they try to stop the kids from being taken, because they still had an agenda to continue their experiments, not only on their physical body, because that's gone now, but also on their non-physical body, their emotional body.
So do you think that they're using these kids, and do you think that they're using the remote viewing for what purpose? Like, why would they use that? What would be the purpose of existing, taking one of your, it's the mental body, existing on a plane of existence out here, I guess, on Earth, right? Is where they're at? Or are they everywhere?
The people doing the remote viewing?
The remote viewing. Because I'm wondering, what would be the purpose of doing that?
In this case, it was to interfere.
Okay.
Also, they would, I would say at least 3 times, they actually spoke to me, telling us to stop.
So they wanted you to stop because talking to the kids or getting them to cross over?
Getting them to cross over.
Okay, so they wanted to keep them here, trapped. What do you think could be the purpose of that? Is it just an emotional experiment?
It's continued experimentation on the emotional body, a continued control.
So physical body's gone, but they're still here, and they're still trapped, and they're still doing experiments on them.
Yes.
Okay. And how does the whole issue with time travel that Montauk is famous for, how does that play into this? Are they using these kids to manipulate things in time, or are they?
Actually, that's a good question.
Does time exist on the spiritual side?
Differently, but yes.
Okay. How differently?
It moves differently. So 5 years to us, and this physical reality, can seem like 5 minutes to someone on the other side, someone in the non-physical. Their perception of time is different, because time is a perception. You talk about past, current, future. Well, everything's already happening at the same time. So time travel, I didn't read the Montauk Chronicles, and I didn't study it. I read a little bit about it, but I didn't read a book. And so I know that they talked about time travel, but I can't say that I know much about time travel itself.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me, because if you think about that plane of existence that we go to when we die, and that they're trapped in right now, if it's different than crossing over, right? It's more like a purgatory existence, maybe. Could we call it that for right now as a term, so everybody can kind of get a grasp of that? Because it seems like you have a physical existence,
Mm-hmm.
then you have this other one where they're trapped, which
Mm-hmm.
is still on this earthly plane.
It probably feels that way, yeah.
Yeah. And then
Purgatory, I mean.
yeah, and then there's the other existence, which is crossing over
Mm-hmm.
into the complete afterlife. That's a moving on point, correct?
Right. Once they cross over, they can't be controlled.
Can they come back after they cross over?
Sure, they can incarnate again.
Well, can they come back down into that middle plane again?
I don't see
Meaning-
why they would want to.
Okay. Well, what if they wanted to help somebody? Like, what if they wanted to be somebody's guardian angel? They're still on the other side. They've moved free. They're happy. They look great. They're not
They can
old,
do that.
right? They can come back down through.
In fact, I'm glad you brought that up because I did write about one teenage boy in my book. His name is Brandon,
Mm-hmm.
and he first came to me in my house. Quite a few kids came to me in my house, which I write about in the book before I even went to Montauk, talking to me about the experiments that they understood, as far as they understood what they were being experimented on for.
Okay.
But certainly they told me about the torture and usually how they died. Some of the really younger ones had no idea what was going on. They just knew they were scared and in pain. But some
How
of the
young
older
are we
ones,
talking about?
how young?
Yeah.
I think the youngest might have been 4.
Oh my gosh. So they're experimenting on kids who are
I
just
wouldn't
toddlers, essentially.
I wouldn't be surprised if they experiment on infants.
Really?
But some of the older ones could tell me, well, here's what they were trying to do. Here's what they were trying to find out as best as they understood. So one was Brandon.
Okay.
So I assisted him, and he told me what they were experimenting on, which I wrote. And he said he wanted to help. He wanted to continue helping. So eventually he crossed over, but then he did come back to assist. He came back to assist other kids in crossing over.
Okay. So he acted like their guardian angel or their
A temporary helper.
yeah. Okay. To get them to understand that there's a way to move on.
Right.
Okay.
Because they were still scared. And here he's a teenage boy who has compassion, not an older adult. A lot of them feared adults
Right.
because
Because that's all that they knew.
that's all they knew was the pain caused by adults.
So they feared adults, but the stories, did any of them tell you stories about what happened? What kind of experimentation was being done?
Hmm. The ones who knew what or understood what was being done to them and the reasoning behind it would tell me, because I would always ask,
Okay.
what happened to you? How were you tortured? Do you know what they were looking for? The younger kids typically didn't know, but the older kids many times did. They would show me pictures. They would tell me the story of what happened. Some of them told me how they were taken.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of kids were foster kids who were sold by the foster family. Some were runaways. Some were just came from poor families. And it wasn't just the United States. A couple came to me from other countries.
Does our government, did they have a secret agenda to all of this? Has anything ever been said to why this is being done? Or, I mean, why would our government even partake in something like this? That, like, what is it about creating? I can understand the scientific part of things where they want to use a human test subject. Usually they'll get people to sign up for, they'll have to say, hey, come in, we'll pay you, and you just sign up to test this new drug, test a new procedure, method, etc. What are they doing that's causing this torture? What's their purpose? And why would they go to such lengths to kidnap children or to buy children in? It just sounds dark and creepy.
It is very dark.
It sounds almost like the underground sex slaves. That is a huge problem. It's a huge epidemic in our world right now.
Mm-hmm.
But almost on a different level. Almost like the torture. Can you explain a little bit about what kind of torture they went through? Was it physical harm torture? Were they hooked up to machines? Was there Um, what what I'm trying to get at is what's going on that they are so concerned about. The government's so concerned that they would go through this method of torture to figure it out.
Right, but even if people like me
Mhm.
and other people who have talked about this before, I'm obviously not the first person to bring up
Right.
people being experimented upon underground. How am I going to prove it? So I can't. All I can do is be very honest and not exaggerate my
Right.
experiences and put them in a book, and then people can decide what they want to believe. But I can't prove anything. At least I don't think so, unless something came out in the news that I had already written about in my book.
Well, now there are some things, right? We had what was it, the Montauk Monster that came out? There's a couple of them actually. As a matter of fact, I could bring that up really quick. We could.
I did, since you bring that up, I almost forgot to mention that at the end of our Montauk trip, we went into the Lighthouse Cafe, which is right next to the lighthouse. And we just happened to sit down next to the fire, very cold outside. And a man was sitting there eating his burger, and he started a conversation, and he was Parks and Maintenance, an employee inside Camp Hero. And then
Really?
he told us a story that he experienced while working there.
Interesting. Because something like this that I pulled up here, this is the Montauk Monster.
I think someone sent that to me right before we went.
And they couldn't figure out what this was. I think the most recent information that came out was that it was a raccoon. It doesn't look like it though. And they have a feeling that when this washed up onto shore, there was more that actually happened here. There were other Montauk
And these
monsters.
aren't photoshopped?
No, this
I'm a
is
bit
an
of
actual,
a skeptic sometimes.
Yeah, as you should be, right? I mean, you should always. But
Yeah,
this was the
there's a lot
real.
of-
Yeah, this was the real picture.
Hmm.
That was a real animal that washed up, and it
Wow.
looked like it was a mutated type animal,
Mhm.
almost like a crossbreed between
Mhm.
different things. It had like a beak to it, almost. You could see like it has this beak look to it. I don't know. I honestly don't know what that is, but there's a. I don't know New York. I've never been to New York. I need to go, but I've never been. So where Montauk is at, there is another little island that's out there that has supposedly a background of experimentation to it.
You're talking about Lyme disease?
Maybe they were experimenting with different chemicals, different like bioagents, and there's a factory that's out there that is owned by the U.S. government that does that. All it does is experiment with different chemicals, etc. But this is it. This image washed up onto I think the beach of Montauk. I'm pretty sure that's why they call it the Montauk Monster. But when it washed up to the shore, everybody was saying, "Oh, this is from, such and such place over here on this island. They're doing all these experiments." When you were up on Montauk, did you and you met with you said the park ranger? You said
Parks and Maintenance.
Parks and Maintenance. Okay, so what did he describe to you? There's for people who actually live there, there's got to be more than just this. This is just in the mainstream news.
Right. He said that he's heard the different stories that surround Camp Hero, but he was very honest, and he said he didn't know what to believe, what's real and what's not real, because there is a lot of fake information out there. And he said that there was one experience that he had that he would never forget. But he was driving his car in Camp Hero, in Camp Hero, and he saw he called it a monster, but it was I guess you could say like a Bigfoot, but it was all black. So, but on two legs, all black, no clothing, and it was just standing there. He said he wanted to hit it so he could prove it. So he could get a corpse and he could prove this monster exists. So he hit the gas, and this, whatever it was, took one step over the road and then disappeared. And he was coming from, because I said, was he going to the radar tower? And he said he was coming from the radar tower. And he said he went back to see how tall he was, and he used the tree as a reference, and it was about 9 feet.
Mm-hmm. Now, that description is very similar to the stories out of the Montauk Project. So in the Montauk Project, they discuss the Montauk Monster, and they do have an image that I'd have to see if I can find. But they do have an image of it. It's almost like a dark, shadowy type creature that looks similar to like a Bigfoot, but it's almost like because it's a shadow, it's in a different realm or dimension, almost like it's kind of moving in between this physical dimension and something else.
Mm.
Now, I looked this up, and it's believed that that Montauk monster that we saw came from a nearby government animal testing facility on the Plum Island Animal Disease Center. That's what it was.
I think Plum Island is also known for Lyme disease.
Okay.
If I recall correctly, I'd have to look it up again.
Okay.
But one of the things that the Parks and Maintenance man also said is, he said it's a good thing that you are coming in the month of January because the ticks are not out. He said you come in the spring and summer, and this place is full of ticks, and most of them have Lyme disease.
Yes, it looks like what it's saying here. So it is the Plum Island Animal Disease Center right there.
Yep.
Where
That's
they
what I
talk about
heard.
the Lyme disease. That's really interesting. Now, when you were out there, was this the only place in your experience that you've had? Because you mentioned there's other places out there that are doing experiments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is it still on kids? Are there some adults that you find?
I'm sure there are
through?
some adults, but none of them have. It's mostly been kids who have come to me, and teenagers, children and teenagers. I think the oldest might have been 19, and then like I said, 4 is the youngest.
Is there a different type of energy that we have as kids and teenagers versus when we're adults? Because what I'm trying to get at is, if kids and teenagers are the ones who are having trouble crossing over, is it easier for an adult to cross over?
I don't know. That's a good question. I can say from my experience that the children carry a lot of fear, especially the ones where the majority of their life, physical life, was being tortured and in pain. And you asked the question, how are they being tortured earlier? Some were being tortured through their brain, so they mind control.
Okay.
Some were beaten in order to facilitate mind control. Some of the little girls told me that they were forced to harm animals. They would bring in a small kitten, and then they would either keep away food or other things in order to get her to a point where she could harm an animal. So that's mind control. And then other things, cutting into their skull, working on their brain, working on different body parts, organs.
Wow. So that's a lot to intake right now. If that's something that we really have as our government, like in a facility that's very similar to this one,
But not just our government.
So everybody's kind of participating in this.
I don't know about everybody. I wouldn't use that word, but
Okay.
I would say it's definitely more than just our own government that's participating in it because they're getting research results.
Can I take this to another level? Does this have anything to do with extraterrestrial or anything that's outside of this planet that's coming in to interfere?
This symbol on the front of my book, this is a replication of the actual symbol that showed up on my car window on one of our trips. I briefly talk about it in the very end, where I give a sneak peek of chapter 1 for my next book, Silent Whispers Book 2, just a continuation of book 1.
Okay.
But this symbol showed up on my driver's side window in the dust. A perfect stamp like this, except this, you only see half of it here on the cover. It was a perfect circle, and it looked exactly like this. And it showed up in under 10 minutes when I walked away. We were at next to a cemetery with no one around. There's no way anyone came up and put that on my window, but it showed up out of the blue. But yes, this definitely is connected to extraterrestrials. I had my own experience with them, which I start the readers off at the very beginning of the book. also ones who don't want me to assist these children.
The extraterrestrials.
Mm-hmm. Because they're doing their own experiments as well.
Right. Now, are they doing experiments that go deeper than just children? Because aren't they doing experiments on everything and everybody, essentially? I've heard a lot of abduction experiences that don't come back very well. Travis Walton is a famous one. There's cattle mutilations. There's all sorts of there's just weird things happening in this world right now that aren't making sense. And I'm wondering if what's going on through this, are we preparing for something? Are we trying to save the human race through it? Are we trying to not save the human race? Are we trying to make it worse? Are we trying to keep people imprisoned? Is this a prison? Like, I'm just curious as to what would be the main goal. And I think it's on everybody's mind. Everybody wants to figure out, the believers who believe in aliens, why has there not been a disclosure? Why are there continuing abductions? Why does the military have advanced technology? What kind of deals are they working out? That goes deeper into the conspiracy stuff, but at the same time, a lot of that is just real. It's real life,
if the governments actually came out and admitted that there are extraterrestrials and they have been working with them, what do you think that would do to highly religious people who believe in a human-made God? Do you think they would begin questioning their religion?
So I do feel that they would, but I don't think it's everybody, because I think that right now we've been so conditioned into it that religion now is being, not that it's being swept away, it's almost like it's being repurposed and reconditioned. It's the Catholic religion. The Pope came out years ago and said, if it's said that there are extraterrestrials, we should accept them and teach them the word of God. So
I missed that.
So why would somebody in a higher power even entertain the idea?
I think that there would be a lot of issues within different religious communities if the government actually admitted to it. But it goes, I think, way beyond that. And I don't know if they'll ever admit to it. But I've been taught that there are around 65-ish species of extraterrestrials that come and go from the planet. The grays is the most widely talked about.
Right.
Anyone can Google gray alien and the images pop up instantaneously. I would say out of all of them, those are really the main ones. There are some others that are fairly dark in terms of their agenda and their intent. Yeah, that's, and some of them, the one I saw had red eyes. And I didn't even know they had red eyes until the one I saw.
Interesting. A lot of times people say that the black eye is more of like a contact lens, almost like something that they put in like sunglasses in a way, because they can't handle the light.
When I first started this, I didn't really, I've heard about different types of aliens and extraterrestrials, but it wasn't something that I studied. It wasn't something I really read about, other than watch the occasional thriller. But
this one here, this was
escalated.
This was one that was on YouTube. That was a video. I remember watching this, and this was. I'll have to see if I can pull this up.
So, this looks a little bit like the one they said was actually false. When they released some files, Roswell maybe, and it came out that the stuff was fake.
Yeah, there's a lot of fake stuff that gets circulated. We now have the technology to fake anything. Yeah. I think that's the problem. People can't trust, and that's what they want. They want you to not be able to trust anything.
I agree 100%.
And then when you have your experience, and a lot of people do, they shut up about it. They don't talk about it. The reason why they don't talk about it is because they're in fear of being judged. And here's a good example right here. I mean, people have experiences where they wake up in the middle of the night. There's something looking at them through their window. And it doesn't matter if they're on the second floor. the 13th floor, it doesn't matter, right? It's almost like they have a way of moving in and out of this existence, this dimension. Like they have a way to be invisible and then just appear. Almost like they can walk through walls. It seems like they're in control of something that we're not in control of.
Well, their intelligence is, through the roof. There's just nothing to compare it to.
Do you think they're spiritual beings? Or do you think that they have a spirit or soul?
I would gather that they have a soul. Certainly, they're not human.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to say that all Greys are mean, that all Greys want to abduct. It's my understanding that some have moved beyond that. They don't hold on to that consciousness so much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also my understanding that they don't really have an emotional body. So they don't feel emotion. So the one that I saw was emotionless. There was no emotion. It was just it was controlling me, but there was no emotion there. There was no anger. There was no hate.
You said it was controlling you. How was it controlling you?
It was paralyzing me.
Okay, that's a common thing that comes up a lot. A lot.
And it wasn't outside the window. He was standing next to the bed,
mm-hmm.
inside the window. Now I broke the paralysis,
mm-hmm.
and I was able to sit up and start screaming at him, but he just stood there and continued to stare at me. But not all species that visit this earth are here to harm. Some are here to assist the planet.
Mm-hmm.
But not many. My understanding is there's not a lot that are here to assist humanity. Maybe a little bit, but some to assist the planet, and then some they have their own dark agenda. But this symbol right here, these were from ones that are here to assist.
Okay. What about something like this? You said assisting. So the tall whites is something that gets thrown around a lot, especially in Hollywood. They seem to be a different type of extraterrestrial species. And they seem to be more of a caring, nurturing, but still at the same time they don't have the emotion like what we would have. So they have emotion. It's almost like a hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like or they are the ones who are more at the control of things. And the Greys seem to be that lower vibrational state. So they seem to be more of the workers. Some have even said the Greys could be robotic in a way, only because when they've seen them, they act robotic.
They do act that way because they don't have any emotion.
Right.
But they're very intelligent, and they know exactly what they're doing. In my second book, which I'm continuing to write, I'm going on more trips. There's a different energy to my second book. It more has to do with aliens, the different ones I've encountered, and I think I've seen those, the tall white ones, but not as tall.
That is one of the characteristics that I think somebody brought up in a story. Trying to think. I'm looking at this picture here only because some are tall, and the ones who are taller seem to be the ones more in control versus the ones who are shorter.
So why is that map of Las Vegas there? Or is that where they've been sighted?
I'm assuming that is exactly from this one. It seems that that's where they've been sighted because you have Nellis Air Force Base. There might be something with Nellis in that story, and everywhere where there is military industrial complex, they know something.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they say that they don't, and I know that people believe it because the majority of people want to believe our government, right? They want to feel
safe
and protected. And I think the old saying was that if somebody tells you they're from the government and they're here to help you, you go the other way because they're not, right? If we are ending up in a society that's trapped by technology, and this technology, think about how far we've come just in 50 years. Who knows if it's from an agreement that was made back in the day to experiment on people. You can experiment on some of our people. We won't do anything. And then at the same time, you give us some kind of technology. Although I don't see how that would quite work, because I think that a lot of times if you're a more advanced race, you're going to say, wait a minute, we can experiment on you no matter what. You can't stop it. But why would they be helping? And what is the ultimate goal with all this technology? The technology is advancing so quickly that we're not going to have the chance to, we're going to be trapped in all of this. We're going to feel like we're protected, but we're really not. It's like you wake up from a dream. You're in a game that you can't. You say, well, I can't escape it, or I'm in a prison, I can't escape it. And it's like they have everybody kind of under this control that they don't need to tell us if they exist. They really don't. They could keep this secret forever. They could hit the reset button at any time. I think that's what people are afraid of, too. Ultimately, is the next world war. Everybody's in fear. I've talked about this before. Fear is the one thing that keeps us so focused on the negative, because we're always thinking the world's going to end, right? 2012, I was so fearful of that.
Really?
Yeah, I was very fearful because I was uneducated. I was thinking to myself, maybe this is true. Maybe there's a sign that they're giving in all these movies, but Hollywood just makes money off of hype, right? But maybe there's a sign to all of this. Maybe something's coming that's going to be the end. But why would there be an end? Why do we have to have an end? And in the natural law of things, they don't believe that even if you go into a black hole, that's the end. You go out the other side, essentially. So there's always death and rebirth, right? So there's always an end, but then the end becomes the beginning of something else. So why would there be an end all to everything? Why would they want to put us into that type of environment to where they're not making money? Because right now they're making money.
I don't think they want an end all.
I don't think they do either. And I think that the big thing that we fear, though, is to have that. And so we want to keep putting people up higher in power. So that way there's policies and procedures and people in place to prevent it. There's corporations owned by the government, etc., that funnel money through secret projects like this. Technology goes up,
but we always have our individuality.
Yes,
we always have access to our own innate individuality.
Do we have a way to escape it? Is death the escape, or are we trapped after we die?
I wouldn't want to escape. I would want to learn as much as I can and live the most joyful, adventurous life as I can while I'm in the physical, and then move on from there, if that is what is most appropriate for me. I want to help as many people as I can while I'm here. I want to enjoy my life. I want to enjoy my work.
Yeah.
I want to enjoy my family. And so I don't want to escape. I just want to learn how to best enjoy where I'm at. So the world, yes, it's going crazy. It's nuts. Everything is nuts right now, and it's going to get worse.
Doesn't it seem like the media, especially, is feeding negativity on everybody?
I think they're helping, but I think people are also, go on Facebook, read people's comments on different articles. They go at each other. They do. They don't even know each other.
They do.
But they go at each other with such anger and hostility. So yeah, part of it is the media, and then part of it is just people are so angry they don't know what to do. But it comes down to individuality.
Is there a way that people can overcome that? I mean, is there something that's in us that we can do, whether it's meditation, deep breathing, something that we can put up a shield to say, hey, all this negativity, I'm blocking it. I don't want anything to do with it anymore. Is there something for people to do that hones in on that spiritualness? And is there such a thing as the white light, a healing energy, something that helps us through this journey? Is there such a thing as that?
Well, first, I would always recommend that your home be your sanctuary.
Okay.
Where you go home, you go into a clean space, physically clean, but also energetically clean. Okay. A space where you feel safe. A lot of people go home to fighting. Yeah. They go home to a spouse or a partner, and all they do is fight. They go home to their kids who are angry and there's more fighting. Your home needs to be your sanctuary.
Yeah.
And because that's what's going to help you recharge your energy so that you can continue doing what you're doing. But also figure out, who are you? Figure out your creativity. What do you want to express? What do you want not just to say vocally? Expression is so much more than this is what I like, this is what I don't like. Okay, that's an opinion. Expression is a way of being. It's a way of living your life. So is your
Taking
expression
action?
compassion? Are you a
So-
compassionate person?
Yeah.
Is your expression knowledge? Is your expression painting, singing? Is your expression being a teacher?
But it's not just thinking about it, right? It's taking action to do it.
It's living it.
It's living it. Yes. So actually feeling, hey, this is who I am. This is what I want to do. This is my passion.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of thinking about it, daydreaming about it, and letting the negativity say that you'll never be that, you just do something about it, right? You take the action.
You take the action even when society says it's not safe.
Okay.
You need to have a real job. You need to do this. You need to do that. You need to have a relationship. You need to have X number of dollars in your bank account before you can go on an adventure. So society tells us that we need to maintain the status quo, that we need to be safe because we need to survive.
That's the fear.
What I've always been taught and what I also teach is survive what? We're all going to die. So you might as well go out with a bang.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So tell me more about with your website and everything.
Mm-hmm.
When people are looking for your book, where can they find that?
Well, right here on the right is my book trailer, Silent
Okay.
Whispers book trailer. They
Okay.
can
Okay.
watch that if they want. And then also, but my book is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of the online stores. You can buy a hard copy paperback or digital Kindle.
Okay, and are you it looks like you do coaching here too?
I do coaching for people who they kind of know what they need to be working on. Maybe they know they need to heal their anger or they need to discover their passion, whatever it might be, but they don't quite know how to go about it. So they've received guidance from their guides or other beings I work with called the elders, who are not guides. They're high consciousness beings. They've received guidance. They understand that guidance, but they don't quite know how to implement it effectively. And so I used to be a school teacher, so I've been trained educationally to go step by step and teach people how to implement.
Okay. Well, you were a school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's why the kids reached out to you? Like, do you think that's why maybe you honed in on that?
Maybe. I don't know.
I wonder if there's something that that you have as a teacher, and not just if you're somebody who expresses knowledge to people to help them grow, to help them learn, you're looked at as that higher authority, essentially, but a nurturing one. And I wonder if that's why, essentially, these younger kids kind of reached out to you and came to you.
I have asked myself, why am I even doing this? What's the purpose behind it? And I talk about that resistance in my book as well. And it still comes up from time to time. Like, so why am I going on another trip and paying X number of dollars for a hotel room and X number of dollars for this and X number of dollars for that? And, to help kids, ultimately, to help these children. But what's the bigger purpose? And I think sometimes I try to get a little too caught up in that.
Mm-hmm.
It's simply to just do it. So it costs money, so what? So it takes time out of my schedule, so what? But to be of assistance and to really help these kids, I think it's going to transcend time.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, that's really good. Well, we're coming up to the 12 o'clock hour. I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to say, because I know that we kind of dug deep into a lot of these stories. Is there anything that you want people to know more about your book, more about this, just if they've encountered anything? Is there a way, could they contact you through your website?
They can contact me through the contact page on my website, absolutely. I do know some feedback I've received from my book is that some people have read it and it triggers memories of things they've experienced that they forgot about and dreams they start having. And some people have realized they may have also had an incarnation in which they were experimented upon. but they didn't even know that existed until they read my book. Some people knew about it, but they hadn't studied it.
Now, is that something that you can help them through?
Mm-hmm.
Could you, when you talk to their spirit guides, when you talk to, now you say you talk to the elders as well, right?
Those beings I work with called the elders, who also are in people's sessions, who can
Okay.
offer more information than guides.
Okay, so they know more than what guides know,
Mm-hmm.
and the information that comes through could be something to help them or to figure out what they went through. Not necessarily in this
But
life,
they're very strong.
okay,
The elders, when I say guides are not fluffy,
right?
the elders are even more not fluffy. They're very to the point, because we're in a time where people need to make a choice. Are you going to heal? Are you going to choose your life for you? Are you going to say this is your life? Or are you going to continue following the status quo? We're in a very strong time, energetic time right now.
What if you don't? What if you choose not to heal?
Then that's okay, but I'm not the person to come to.
Okay. Now, do some people? You mentioned that we have like different layers to us. We have a mental projection of ourselves. We have a spiritual projection, a physical. Could it be that the physical says, "Hey, there's an issue here, and I need help," and then the spiritual says, "No, we don't need it," or the emotional says, "No, we don't need it"? And do we fight ourselves a lot?
Do we fight ourselves a lot? Yes, absolutely. People have internal conflict all of the time. But before you can have a physical issue, you usually have a spiritual issue, an etherical issue, an emotional issue that over time will manifest as a physical issue. The exceptions to that would be someone who was exposed to some toxicity as a child, and over time it just got worse and worse. But still, there
Just
can be an emotional component
like
to
mental
that.
abuse, or what do you mean toxicity? Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, some people have been exposed to lead, for example, as a
Oh, you mean
child.
physical?
Physical toxicity, right?
Okay.
And
okay.
and it continues to create havoc in their body.
Yeah.
But there's still going to be an emotional component to that. But let's take, for example, someone who has a heart attack, or they have heart disease. Well, a lot of times a person who has heart disease has anger issues, and that can be suppressed or it can be obvious. Well, in order to work with the heart, you want to work with the physical piece, of course. You don't want to ignore that. But you also need to work with the energetic piece, the emotional piece.
Do you think a lot of what's going on with the negativity as well is in our food that we eat?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
It seems like the change that everybody's trying to go to with being organic, essentially. No chemicals sprayed in the food. Animals, I know a lot of people like myself. I used to be a red meat eater, right? I used to eat a lot of red meat. I don't do that anymore, and it's not because I think I'm changing mentally on a different level to where I'm looking at things differently. And I'm saying, well, number one, that animal was probably killed inhumanely.
Probably.
It's probably made up of multiple animals. And I know that people say that we're supposed to eat animals. That's kind of the whole point of us. Other animals, predators, eat animals. Then there are some that don't eat animals. They just eat plants, grass, right? Why is it that we can't do that with our bodies? Because I've read where if we go completely meat free and we go to the vegan lifestyle, people get sick. Why is that? Why are we trapped in a body to where we can't make that choice? Well, we could, but it affects us differently.
I think our brain needs, for most people, animal fat. And I think that some people, they go vegetarian because they simply feel better. So maybe their brain doesn't need, to that extent. Obviously, everyone needs to be eating fat, healthy fat, of course. I'm not talking trans fat, but good healthy fat. Your brain needs fat.
Okay.
People who go on a low fat diet end up starving their brain. A lot of people who went on low-fat diets back in the 70s ended up going on antidepressants after it, and people can research the connection between the low-fat diet and antidepressants. And this is what I learned actually from my teacher, not something I discovered myself. But the brain needs fat. You can get that from various types of fat. It doesn't have to be animal fat. I think it goes based on how you feel. If you feel really good as a vegetarian or a vegan, then that should be your diet. If you feel really good eating animal fat in balance with other things, then that should be your diet.
Is there something, though, that is creating this negative kind of feeling to everybody else? Like, and here's what I mean by that. The chemicals that they spray, the abuse that the animal goes through, does that pass on through to our bodies? Do we pick that up?
That is a good question. And if an animal maintains that trauma, I would say it more so would maintain trauma in how it's treated throughout its life, not necessarily how it was slaughtered. I do have a friend who has cattle out in Utah, and she is the most humane person. Now, the cattle that she sells, the beef that she sells from her cattle, is purely non-GMO, organic, doesn't have any antibiotics or hormones, and is purely grass-fed, except I think at the very end. But and they're out there free ranging. So I think you can have an animal who simply enjoys its life eating the grass.
Right.
And then they become our food.
Right. And is there anything wrong with either side of the spectrum? Because I know a lot of people say it's wrong to eat animals, but then people say it's not wrong. It's actually wrong just to not be who you're supposed to be. So the argument is not as black and white as politics right now, but is that still something that people should be mindful of? Is it just more of a feeling that if they feel they shouldn't do it and that they should be more focused on eating as like a vegan? Is that okay for them? What should they look for?
I think people need to eat based on their own body and what their body says it needs, based on their own research, based on trying different foods. Maybe try a diet for a week or so and see how you feel. But, and then the diet that best fits you, make that your long-term diet. But of course, if you're going to eat meat, I would always recommend that you eat meat that's not shot with hormones, that's as non-GMO as you can get.
Yeah, I think we can all agree not to eat any kind of food that has the chemical, just any chemicals used in it, correct? Because that chemical is directly going into our body.
The animals that are shot up with hormones, yes, you're going to be taking in those hormones and antibiotics as well.
What about the fruits and vegetables that are sprayed?
Fruits and vegetables, my understanding is not only are they being sprayed for bugs, but they're also being sprayed with other chemicals. I believe some vaccines are getting sprayed on crops.
Really?
I'll have to look that up again. It's been a while. But they're being sprayed with a lot of things. Now, you can go organic, of course, and it's going to be better, but don't assume it's free of pesticides.
Is it true? Yeah, is it true organic? I think that was the one thing I was talking to somebody about yesterday, was if it's true organic, then it would be something really from your garden. That's something that you could
even
control.
From your garden. If it's out in the open, you're going to have the pollution.
Right.
You're not spraying it, obviously, which is good, but you're still going to have the pollution. So getting absolutely pure food is impossible at this day and age. But organic is still going to be better for you than conventional in terms of toxicity.
So you mentioned pollution. What about chemtrails? What about the spraying?
There's a lot of controversy around chemtrails, and a lot of people think it's just the contrails. Personally, I don't believe it's just contrails.
I have seen a lot of different areas of the contrails, chemtrails brought to the internet, to where they say, here's the reason why it's a chemtrail. Here's the reason why it's contrail. Well, I know as a pilot, I've flown many times, and a contrail is the condensation that's built up at that altitude that creates that it evaporates. It doesn't sit there hanging forever, creating more and more clouds and creating a haze that's overcast.
Not to mention the crisscrossing in the sky.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I did see with my own eyes back in 2010, everybody was being very fearful of the 2012 events that were going to supposedly take place. And some say that something happened. I don't know what happened, but some say it happened.
I must have missed it.
It didn't, right? But during that time, chemtrails were being sprayed a lot. People were worried about Planet X. They were worried about something in the sky that with the sun, something that was they couldn't explain, but the reason for the chemtrails was it was masking it. It was covering everything up. I saw a plane make rectangular patterns in the sky, constantly spraying, and it kept going, and it kept almost like it was mowing the grass. You know, you make those lines where you mow the grass and you stay within that pattern. That's what it was doing. It was just going back and forth, and it had a rectangular pattern. It was going back and forth. And that was the turning point for me, because I knew that there was 100%, 90% chance that everything was contrail. I was like, everything's contrail. I just knew it. But when I saw that, I realized there's something different going on. And I thought, my brain said to myself, I said, why would the government do something like that? And why wouldn't they tell us? And then that's when my curiosity started getting to me. Why would they tell you? If they're covering something up, they're covering something up. They're not going to tell anybody. If they're spraying and they need to spray, or maybe they don't need to spray, maybe we're all being experimented on. They're not going to tell us. They're not going to say anything. They're gonna let us be the experimentation.
And then they'll make fun of people who talk about chemtrails.
Yeah, exactly.
So they, you know, just like with the ETs, they make fun of people who talk about ETs or who want to look beyond this earth. That's the first thing that they do. That's the first thing a lot of people do. Is first you ridicule. You make fun of a person's thoughts. You make fun of the person's ideas. And then you go from there trying to shut them down.
Because people are afraid of ridicule, right?
Most people are
social.
afraid.
We're social beings. We need to communicate with each other. We need to have acceptance within groups of each other. So if we don't have acceptance because of something we experienced and we feel outcasted, we don't want that. So if we don't want that, then we're going to stay quiet, right? We're not going to say anything.
Right.
And so what's going to happen is that people are going to experience extraterrestrials. They're going to experience spiritual issues. They're going to experience chemical issues that they know. Some people know for a fact. Maybe they have an inside knowledge to it. And yet they're going to refrain from saying anything because they don't want people to just bash them and to not accept them, to leave them out of the social groups and to say hurtful things to them. And people on the internet, especially, what's really weird is that if you were to watch something on the internet and it was about extraterrestrials or it was about chemtrails, it was about something conspiracy, anything like that, people will immediately take a step back and say, well, it could be, maybe they're making a good point to it, but this person here says that they're stupid, or this next person says, hey, you don't know what you're talking about because I worked at such and such place and that we would never do that. And all of a sudden now that negative trolling that goes on the internet, which is paid for and bought by the government, all of a sudden it goes right back and feeds to the normal population who's just reading it, and it's triggering something in their brain.
I absolutely. I completely agree that the majority of people want to be accepted.
Yeah.
On some level, even if they say they don't. Some people like to say, I reject that notion as an individual, and some people are truthful with that. But wouldn't it be wonderful for a person to be so invested in their own quality of life that they do let go of potential rejection, ridicule, where they put themselves on a pathway to discover who they are, their purpose in life, why they're here, you know, how are they connected
Right.
You know, this is one planet. There's so much more beyond this one planet. There's so much more beyond this physical experience that we're living. I know because I've experienced a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I can't even imagine what I've experienced is so tiny, so minuscule compared to what's out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm really intrigued. So I am intrigued about your book. And what the book is called Silent Whispers.
Silent Whispers, what one thinks is crazy, another knows is true.
Wow. That makes sense for what we were just talking about then,
Yes.
right? Okay. So people can find you again on your website.
Empowermentthroughhealing.org.
Uh-huh.
They can look at what guided sessions are. That's with your guides or the elders.
Okay.
Tai is just energy work that I do. That's in person only, but I do guided sessions.
Okay.
Skype, phone, in person. And then people can schedule directly on my website.
Okay. Well, I want to say that I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And hopefully we can have you back on later in the future because I really want to know more about that symbol and what that means. But thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
So tell me.